Greetings to all of you. This is Dr. Lisa, and today we are going to continue our series on IR theories. And today we will be speaking about liberalism. Liberalism is a school of thought in international relations, emphasizes the importance of a free trade, democracy, and international institutions in promoting peace and prosperity. Liberals believe that these factors create a web of interdependence that makes war less likely and cooperation more likely. Liberals attempt to explain the international politics from interdependence, harmonies of interest, and collective securities perspective. Depending on the concept of cooperation instead of conflict, liberals prefer to seek diplomatic and other ways of cooperation to resolve conflict, in contrast to realists who prefer confrontations and war. But this doesn't mean that liberals are idealists, firmly reject the war option in international politics. But for them, war would be the last option after exhausting all other options available. In order to understand our theory better, let's differentiate between liberalism and realism. Liberalism advocates individual political and economic freedom, free trade in markets, and very limited rule for the state. They believe that the state is one of other actors in international system, like international organizations, for example. While realists believe that the state is the main and the only actor placed in the international arena. Both liberals and realists see that international system is anarchic. While for realists, to deal with such anarchic system, states should seek self-help strategies by maximizing power. While this might lead to conflict, of course, liberals believe that security dilemma can be solved by engaging states with collective security interests, economic engagements, and agreements. Where liberals believe that humans are inherently good, prefer to cooperation and live in peace. With that, they have optimism view to the international relations, in contrast to realists who believe that humans are selfish, power seekers, and competitive. That they have pessimistic viewpoint to international world realm. Having said that, now let's move on to see the historical context on which classical liberalism has emerged. Classical liberalism emerged in the 18th and 19th century, has its roots in the Enlightenment period, where we can find the name of Adam Smith, one of the primary initial writers on economic liberalism. He introduced the notion of natural harmony of interest between individuals in the market, whereby the invisible hand of competition turns self-regarding behavior into aggregate social benefits. Adam Smith was the first to use the phrase liberal system. He advocated minimal interference of government in market economy, without objecting the state's provision of the basic public goods. In Smith's view, if everyone is left to his own economic devices instead of being controlled by the state, the result would be harmonies and more equal society of ever-increasing prosperity. This underpinning the move towards the capitalist economic system in the late 18th century and the subsequent demise of the mercantilist system, where private property and individual contracts form the basis of economic liberalism. Another Enlightenment philosopher, John Locke, who considered one of the most important political theorists and philosophers of the 17th century, where the French Revolution was inspired by his democratic and liberal ideas. Locke has laid out his political theory through his book on civil government in 1690, in which he called for restraining the king and church powers, emphasizing on the individual freedom and rejecting tyranny and injustice practices in the name of the divine right that contradicts the natural rights of freedom and equality. Locke has argued that individuals have the natural rights, including the right to life, liberty, and property, He introduced the concept of democratic civil rights and considered the first to call for the separation of powers. Locke ideas appeared in the Declaration of Human Rights, issued by the Constituent Assembly in 1789, and the rights suggested by Locke became the Bill of Rights in the first 10 revision of the U.S. Constitution. It's worth noting that Locke posited the necessity of separating the state power from the church domination. One of his important ideas that also inspired liberal theory was that the duty of the state is to maintain freedom and individual property, and to enact laws to protect citizens and punish the outlaws. Accordingly, freedom and equality will prevail as the basic concept of community control. We can also speak about Immanuel Kant, who argued that a just and lasting peace could be achieved through a federation of free and democratic states. In his essay Perpetual Peace, a Philosophical Sketch in 1795, Kant has outlined the conditions where necessary for the establishment of lasting and just peace among nations. Let's go through each principle and provide examples to further illustrate their meanings. First one being, no secret treaty of peace shall be held valid in which there is tacitly resolved matter for a future war. This principle emphasizes the importance of transparency and honesty in peace agreements. It asserts that any peace treaty that contains hidden provisions or unresolved conflicts that may lead to a future hostilities should not be considered valid. For example, if two countries sign a peace treaty to end a war, but secretly agree to continue supporting opposing factions within a third country, this would violate the principle. Second one, no independent state, large or small, shall come under the domination of another state by inheritance, exchange, purchase, or donation. This principle aims to prevent the subjugation of one state by another through various means, such as inheritance, exchange, purchase, or donation. It promotes the idea that the state should maintain their sovereignty and not to be subjected to domination by external powers. An example would be if a powerful nation attempts to annex a smaller country through coercion or even economic means. Third principle, standing armies shall in time be totally abolished. This principle suggests that eventual elimination of standing armies, which are permanent military forces maintained during peacetime. Kant believed that standing armies were a source of tension and potential aggression between states. While the complete abolition of standing armies has not been achieved, there have been efforts to reduce military forces and rely more on diplomacy and international organizations to resolve conflicts. Fourth principle, national debts shall not be contracted with a view to external friction of the states. This principle discourages nations from incurring debts with the intention of using them as a leverage or as a means of pressuring other countries. It argues that national debts should be managed responsibly and not be used as a tool for exerting influence or causing conflicts. An example of violation of this principle would be if a country deliberately accumulated large debts with the goal of using its creditors of economic dependence as a leverage in international negotiations. Fifth principle suggested by Kant, no state shall by force intervene with the constitution or government of another state. This principle advocates for non-interference in the internal affairs of other states. It asserts that a state should respect the sovereignty and autonomy of each other, refraining from using force to intervene in the political structure or governance in other countries. A violation of this principle would occur if a nation invades another country to impose its preferred political system or even to remove its government. Last principle: no state shall during war permit such act of hostility which would make mutual confidence in the subsequent peace impossible. Such are the employment of assassins, poisoners, a breach of capitulation, and incitement to treason in the opposing state. This principle restricts the use of certain extreme acts of hostility during wartime that would undermine the trust and hinder future peace negotiations. Employments of such acts, including employing assassins to target enemy's leaders, using poison as a weapon, violating surrender agreements or capitulation, and inciting treason within the opposing state. By adhering to these principles, states can maintain a level of trust or confidence between them that make peace negotiations would be conducted in a good faith. 3 definitive articles by Immanuel Kant outline the specific principles that, if implemented, would not only cease hostilities but also lay the groundwork for lasting peace. Let's delve into each article and provide examples to further illustrate their meanings. The civil constitution of each state shall be republican. So this article suggests that for a lasting peace to be established, each state should adopt a republican form of government. A republican government is one that is based on the principles of representative democracy, where power is vested to the people and decisions are made through elected representatives. By advocating for republican constitutions, Kant aimed to promote principles such as individual rights, equality, and participatory. An example of this article in action would be the establishment of democratic governments in countries that previously experienced authoritarian rule, allowing citizens to have a say in the political processes and promoting stability and cooperation. Second one, the law of nations shall be founded on a federation of free states. This article emphasizes the importance of international cooperation and the creation of a federation of free states to govern the relations between nations. It suggests that nations should work together through mutual agreements, treaties, and institutions to establish common laws and regulations. This would foster trust, cooperation, and resolution of conflicts through peaceful means. An example of this principle can be seen in the establishment of international organizations like United Nations, where member states come together to discuss global issues, promote cooperation, and seek peaceful solutions to conflict. Third principle: the rights of men as citizens of the world shall be limited to the conditions of the universal hospitality. This article highlights the idea of world citizenship and that individuals should be treated with hospitality and respect regardless of their nationality. It promotes the notion that all human beings, as citizens of the world, should be entitled to certain rights and protections. This includes the right to be treated fairly, to have access to justice, and to be free from discrimination. An example of this principle in practice is a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which establishes a set of fundamental rights and freedoms that should be universally protected irrespective of national boundaries. Together, these 3 definitive articles aim to establish not only a cessation of hostilities, but also a foundation for enduring peace. This advocates for democratic governance, international cooperation, and the recognition of universal rights. While these principles may be challenging to be fully implemented in the complexities of the international relations, they serve as a guiding for a framework for promoting peace, justice, and stability among nations. So, according to Kant, a world of good morality, responsible state would be less likely to engage in wars. Thus, many liberals argue that the realist emphasizes on the international anarchy and the consequences or the consequent insecurity is excessive. International cooperation and peaceful engagement among states and other actors are possible. There are no inseparable obstacles to block us. Although achieving such a progress takes decisive actions by both state and non-state actors, international and non-governmental organizations, as well as individual and groups of one kind or another. You have to put in mind that this phase of liberalism, which referred to as a classical liberalism theory, starting from 17th to the early 20th century, were the Enlightenment period, the separation between church and the state, the domination of reason, rationality, scientific revolution, and industrialization. All these changes have led to the emergence of liberal ideas. Yet you have to put in mind that realize that the world was not peaceful and idealist as it seems, where the same Western countries which were advocating the liberty and the freedom at home were colonizing other countries in Latin America, West Asia, South Asia, Africa, and India. That made some to say that these countries are practicing democracy inside and hypocrisy outside. Now, the outbreak of the First World War and after that the Great Depression in 1929 and its consequences, which continued in many countries until the onset of the Second World War, we can say that liberalism theory have suffered, because it couldn't help in maintaining peace and stability at international level, and failed to build a solid economic relations among conflictual powers. So it was not the best theory at that time to explain the international politics, while the tilt of balance went to realism school of thought. By the end of Cold War era and the collapse of Soviet Union, liberalism revived with the emergence of United States as a unipolar capitalist power and gave the push for liberal hegemony to conquer the international politics arena. So to wrap up my lecture for today, I will give you the most important aspect of classical liberalism in international relations. First one, economic liberalism is a central aspect of liberalism in IR. It argues that a free trade, open markets, and economic interdependence promote global prosperity, peace, and stability. Liberals advocate for reducing trade barriers, embracing globalization, and promoting the free movement of goods, services, and capital. Second one, international system is anarchic, so states seek to achieve their national interests through international institutions, democracy, and interdependence. Third one, liberals in international relations highlight the significance of international institutions, such as intergovernmental organizations, UN, EU, transnational organizations, in addition to non-governmental organizations such as Oxfam, Red Cross, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International. Without forgetting, of course, the vital role of social media such as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube in international arena. Liberals believe that such institutions became vital in international politics. Liberals in international relations often support the democratic peace theory, which suggests that democracies are less likely to engage in war with one another. They argue that democratic values and institutions encourage peaceful conflict resolution, respect for individual rights, and the rule of law. Classical liberalism argued that states act in their own self-interest, but can also cooperate and engage in mutually beneficial exchanges. They believe that domestic state system can determine its foreign policies and relations. For example, if a state adopted pro-environmental policies, that will of course affect its relation and trade with other states. With that, I will be concluding my lecture for today. In next lecture, we will speak about a new liberalism theory. See you next time.